Recently, a creator I follow, John Lewis, posted the following thought on YouTube. Maybe it's an older millennial thing, but I can't trust anyone making cultural political content online, and they never show their face. No pictures, no live stream, or nothing. We've had too many cases of bad actors with shady pasts or ties to weird organizations infiltrating communities and movements, especially past 2020 uprisings. Just Google COINTELPRO. I'm someone trying to get into making cultural, political content. I don't show my face. Now, I get where John is coming from. I actually don't think you should trust anyone, regardless of the amount of face involved. But I thought I'd offer my perspective on why I choose not to show mine. Whenever I think about this topic, I think about Yu Yu Hakusho. If you're not familiar, it's one of the best anime ever made. It was on Adult Swim back in 2002. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. The third of a total of 4 arcs in the series is called the Chapter Black Saga. It's named after an item in the arc called Chapter Black, a videotape containing thousands of hours of the absolute worst of humanity.
Over its millennia of existence, the human race has committed very heinous crimes against others and their own. This videotape is a compilation. It documents the most unspeakable acts of all. It is said to run thousands of hours.
If you've been on the internet as long as I have, you may have realized that Chapter Black isn't really fictional. It exists today, right now, in the real world. It's just that it's spread out in bits and pieces across the internet. These pieces lurk like little spiders, waiting in these dark corners for unsuspecting victims to reach an exploratory hand into their lairs. I got my first computer in 1999 when I was still in middle school. It wasn't long before I was downloading songs off of Kazaa, playing them in Winamp. By the time I was 13 or 14, I was introduced to a particular website, probably by the edgelord teenagers from some online game I had been playing that probably changed me forever. Rotten.com. For some people, just hearing that name is enough. Rotten had extremely graphic images and videos of real, violent deaths. Some of the images are still burned into my mind 20 years later. Morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I would click through the images until I found something that disturbed me enough that I'd have to stop. I continued playing this game of chicken with myself until the time I saw a particular video of a man beating a woman to death in an elevator. The images on the site were one thing, but this video was a whole nother thing. I can't really explain it. It wasn't particularly gruesome, but it was extremely visceral. It can't have been very long because my 56K modem wouldn't have allowed it. But it felt like it went on for hours. It felt more real than anything I'd seen before. The night I watched it, I remember I had nightmares about it, and when I woke up, I still couldn't get the images out of my head. I was truly shaken to the core. It was probably the first time in my young life that I felt such a deeply unpleasant and persisting emotion that I had no way to process. That was when I swore the website off for good, and I spent my time desperately trying to take my mind off of it until hopefully it would eventually fade into my memories. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the last time I'd see disturbing things. It was a Wild West era of the internet. We take rickrolling for granted these days, given the types of things people would trick you into clicking back then. I'm not even going into detail about what sort of absolutely vile things I saw from downloading videos from LimeWire that had misleading file names. And it's not just disturbing imagery. Hiding in plain sight in the lawless forums and chat rooms in the late 90s and the early aughts was the original evil that spawned the type of stuff we see in places today like 4chan and Kiwi Farms, with which you're probably at least vaguely familiar. places in which the most reprehensible things anyone could possibly say to another human being are said. This just seems to be the way some people behave when they think they can get away with it. Our own special version of Lord of the Flies is being acted out in real time. People may not be pushing rocks off of cliffs onto each other, but in some ways, the reality is even worse. Targeted harassment can last for years. During that time, the victims can be psychologically manipulated, toyed with, and tormented, and that can very easily lead to tragedy. The mainstream news has been covering cases like Tyler Clementi and Megan Meyer for over 15 years, but the majority of these cases go unreported. These are just the ones that we know about, and we also don't really know yet how much mental illness and suffering and the loss of life actually stems from things like this. Tyler and especially Megan were younger victims of bullying, but adults aren't safe either. For one of the most prominent examples, I highly recommend watching Innuendo Studios' video on Gamergate or FD Signifier's deep dive on the topic, which also explains how it's not relegated exclusively to right-wing trolls, but people on the left like ContraPoints and Lindsay Ellis also receive this kind of hate from the very people who they make content for. It's generally kind of just an unwritten understanding that you're bound to receive death threats at some point if you choose to make content. The vast majority are, of course, idle threats, but it really only takes one for it to matter. Even if you can deal with the death threats and the harassment, doxers can target your friends and family. People who have absolutely nothing to do with the content you're putting out can be involved in harassment simply due to the fact that they know you in real life. While I might be able to deal with people targeting me alone, I don't feel like I would be able to deal with people going after my family. And I also have mental health concerns to consider. Some people can easily brush off harassment, but not everyone deals with things the same way. John also mentions COINTELPRO, but to that, I got to point out that William O'Neill didn't exactly hide his face from Fred Hampton. Didn't stop what happened to him from happening. As for being targeted myself, I'm not under the illusion that not showing my face is enough to keep the government from finding out who I am if they wanted to, but I guess it feels like it's better than nothing. Ultimately, this is all kind of a moot point for me. I'm nobody. This is my first video. I don't have a following. Odds are I never will have one. If the FBI was going to pick someone to infiltrate the left or to put them on a list, they'd probably start with someone that has greater than or equal to 1 subscriber. Some of my favorite channels, like Sean and Jose, do have a following though, and I really think that you're missing out if you dismiss them out of hand because they don't have a face cam. I'll end this video by reiterating a point I made in the beginning. You shouldn't trust anyone, including me, regardless of if they show their face or not. Just because they show their face doesn't mean they can be trusted, and just because they don't doesn't mean they can't. It's ultimately going to be up to us as individuals to make informed decisions for ourselves, listening to what people say and paying attention. So that was my very first video ever. Thank you for listening, watching. As you can probably tell, I'm still pretty nervous, getting used to talking to a microphone like it's a person. I'm working on getting the levels right, still learning this video editing software, putting the images in, and is a whole thing that I didn't even realize how much there was to it. If you want to go watch someone who's actually good at it, you can go and subscribe to John Lewis. Go watch his video on Sorry to Bother You. It was really good. Go subscribe to FD Signifier if you're not already. I don't know what you're doing. Go subscribe to Innuendo Studios and Jose and Sean. If you're okay with not seeing the faces, those last two are two of the best creators, along with FD Signifier, on the whole platform, in my opinion. And yeah, I know this is kind of a weird thing to make before I've even put out real content of my own. But like I said, I'm still figuring things out. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I've been writing. I'm trying to figure out what I actually want to talk about, what I actually want to make a video out about. And after I read that comment by John, that this was just, hot, fresh in my mind, so I wanted to go ahead and make it while it was there. So I hope you got something out of this. If you didn't, then hopefully I'll do better on the next video. Thanks for watching.